Ceann Comhairle, I'd like to first of all thank you for your interest in this whole matter, and I'm aware that only for your initiative none of it would have ever happened. I'd also like to thank Eileen Flynn for the work she did as chair, and to say that she brought a knowledge to this subject that was invaluable, and a contribution and an expertise that I think a lot of us who haven't lived the experience lack. It was a great privilege to be vice chair of this committee, and it was a committee that worked cross-party in a very, very cohesive and agreed fashion. I'd also like to say to all of my friends in the traveller community, reports don't get things done. They're only the first steps of laying out what needs to be done, and there's a lot that needs to be done. As part of the work of this committee, we visited Lavery Park, St Margaret's and 4 sites in Galway. I was familiar with the sites in Galway. I wasn't familiar with the other sites. I have to say that Lavery Park, the nearest I saw to it in terms of the external, I'm not talking about the conditions inside the properties, I'm talking about the public realm. The nearest I saw to was Soweto in South Africa. And this, we think, is a first world country. I think it's fair to say that, as has been highlighted, the traditional approach by government to this is to be a problem to be solved. I always have seen travellers as a community to be cherished, and a community that we must give real equality to. There was a very comprehensive survey on attitudes, rural pluralism and diversity in Ireland, a very professional work published by Micheál McGrail, a sociologist from Maynooth, in 2011, and it was a long series of them where he can tell you what our attitude to every group in Irish society is. It's interesting that in that book he dedicated it as follows: "This book is dedicated to the emancipation of the travelling people, Ireland's indigenous ethnic minority." I remember when I was writing the foreword to the book that one of the most striking statistics was as follows: in relation to the travelling people, the results are good and bad. On one hand, a considerable minority, 18.2%, would refuse citizenship to travellers, and on the other hand, tolerance towards travellers is indicated by increasing number of people who would welcome a traveller into their family. But let's look at the first figure. 18%, nearly 1 in 5 people you meet in the street believes that travellers should not have citizenship. In fact, half of those believe they should be deported. And this is scientific. This book, when you read the whole totality of the book and our attitude towards various nations around the world, you see that the least group that we respect for are an indigenous group. The other thing that is absolutely extraordinary is when you look at the demographics. In the population as a whole, about 27% are in the 1 to 19 age group. In travellers, that's 52%. So how are there so many young people in the traveller community? Because there are so few old people compared to the rest of society. For example, when you look at 60 to 79, in society in general, there's 12.6%. In the traveller community, 3.7%. That's 25%. When you go to 80 plus, there's 2.7%. In society in general, there's 0.3%, in other words, 1/10, give or take, of the number of over 80-year-olds in the traveller community per population. Do I believe those figures are true? Do I believe these attitudes that I've indicated there are still valid in our society? Yes, I do. Some time ago, a house was purchased by Galway City Council for travellers that had been living in the county area for over 20 years. Mysteriously, in the middle of the night, it got burnt down. When the council went to rebuild the house, there were also objections lodged to the planning. And I think that tells you something of attitude. Therefore, there is a huge amount of work to be done, and we can't afford to be sitting on it. As is said in the chairperson's foreword, over the years there have been numerous reports and studies produced which have highlighted the extreme difficulties and challenges faced by the traveller community. Unfortunately, it's clear that they have not succeeded in improving conditions in travellers' line. So I think when we wrote this report was a report not for debating, but for action. I would commend Éamon Ó Cuív what you said, and I look forward to the Standing Committee, because I believe unless we're on this every week, and new issues will arise that we haven't covered in this report, unless we're on it every week, we will not see change. I'm 30 years in politics. I have worked on this issue. But do I see much change? Do I still see people in my constituency in totally unacceptable accommodation? Yes. Do I see people who can't get replacement caravans because City Council says they can only afford their share of 4 of them, even though there's 20 or 25 of them that are in absolutely disgraceful conditions? And as I often said, would you sleep in a freezing caravan that's damp every night of the week just because somebody in this very wealthy state says, well, sorry, we can only afford 4 of them this year? Therefore, we have a huge job of work to do. The Oireachtas has a job of work to do. And it's time we did it. It's time we dealt with the way society has treated travellers. But the other thing I would believe, from my experience, and that is that it is time that not only had we a lead minister with responsibility for travel with power, but that minister needs a dedicated own fund, similar, for example, to what has been given to the islands, where if somebody in any other department is not doing the job, that they can step up with the fund and intervene and make the thing happen, because the time for prevarication and delay is over. It's now a time for action, and I hope that the result of this report is not more debates, but action to improve the lives, the kind of action that I have not seen in my time in politics.